All right, well, our next guest this morning is Itamar Rabinovich. He's the former Israeli ambassador to the United States. Mr. Ambassador, thanks very much for taking the time to speak to us today. All right, let's go. Unfortunately, we've had a problem with the connection. All right. Ambassador Rabinovich.
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. Thanks very much for taking the time to speak to us this morning. All right, well, let's move over to what's happening between Israel and Iran. It's been a very busy week. It started with an attack on an Iranian consulate in Syria. Then we had retaliation by Iran. We saw almost 300 drones and missiles launched at Israel. And then the night before last, we had, this is the curious part. The only thing that we know is that Washington, D.C. has said that these were Israeli strikes, although Israel not taking any, denying anything, and Iran going as far as to say that there were no attacks at all, that nothing happened. Can you explain to us what's going on here, really?
Yes, but let me begin by, really at the beginning. You said it all began with an Israeli attack on an Iranian consulate in Damascus. First of all, it was, technically speaking, a consulate, but actually a position of the Iranian Revolutionary Guards. The people who were affected there were military who were organizing the Iranian offensive against Israel. It all began with Iranian proxies from 5 directions attacking Israel for almost half a year now. And the Iranians have become quite adept at using others. So this time Israel decided to hit the Iranians directly and hit the person who was orchestrating all this effort. In any event, the Iranians retaliated with that missile and drone attack that you mentioned. And the question was, what should Israel do in return? Now, no one knows exactly what Israel did, but what we can say is this. It was a calibrated attack, limited in scope. Israel, or the Israeli planners, tried to find the perfect point at which you respond on the one hand and you do not provoke the Iranians to retaliate on the other hand, and thus continue a cycle of violence. Possibly the points hit in the center of Iran, near Isfahan, were close to the Iranian nuclear installations, to the radar protecting them, and it was a signal sent by Israel. So it was more a signal than a retaliation. Hopefully, it would be sufficient to close this particular cycle of violence and let us deal with the other issues that have preoccupied us for the past 6 months.
That's right. Hopefully the attention can go back to Gaza. But now I also wonder a little bit, because this happened just after an interview on CNN by Iran's foreign minister warning Israel that should it retaliate, that that Israel should expect an instant response. Now, obviously, Israel called the bluff, and there was no response, and thus far there hasn't been. I wonder, where was I going with this? Sorry, it's early Saturday morning. I wonder if this sort of response, obviously it was very limited in scope, is that going to satisfy the hardliners in Israel?
Well, whether the hardliners in our government are satisfied or not is a secondary issue. The important thing is that the main element in the government and the military leadership all came to the conclusion that this scale of response is optimal from Israel's point of view. I'm sorry that we do have these hardline elements in the government, but there they are. and they'll just have to live with reality in this case.
All right. Well, that's very good to hear. So, in your opinion, this will be it. There will be no further escalation.
There should be. It seems, there's no telling, and predictions are dangerous. Of course, it's a dangerous preoccupation. But it seems to me that this particular round is now over. Unfortunately, the problem is not over because the Iranian pressure continues, not just against Israel, against the Arab countries in the Gulf. And, 3 weeks ago, Iran fired missiles into Pakistan and into Syria against groups that it is opposed to. So the Iranians now have a sense of power and entitlement, and they are the main source of instability in the Middle East.
That's right, and an increasing relationship with Russia and China.
Correct. This is what we call the new Cold War. The West against, in the Middle East, mainly Iran and Russia. China is in a secondary position, but the relationship between Iran and Russia is now very close. It's manifested not just in the Middle East, but as you know very well in Ukraine, where the same drones that were sent from Iran to Israel are being heavily used against Ukraine.
Unfortunately so. All right, so now let's move to Israel proper. And will Israel go ahead with its operation in Rafah? I think that's what's on most people's minds right now.
Yeah, probably yes, but the main question is not the operation, but what scale of operation. It's difficult for me to envisage a full-scale maneuver similar to what happened in the northern part of Gaza. It's just too complicated. There are more than 1 million people in the region. It's very close to the border with Egypt, and it's very risky to operate in that region. And Israel can choose limited operations in order to conclude finally this war in operation and move on to better times.
All right, and a final question I wanted to ask is the role of the Gulf states right now. Should there be an escalation between Israel and Iran, where would the Gulf states find themselves in that case?
Well, they know where their heart is, but of course they do not want to become a full-fledged target of Iran. They did help Israel with deflecting the Iranian missile and drone attack. They were not part of the Israeli response, and we'll just have to play it by ear. There are countries that have very clear interest in this, and these interests are with the West and with Israel and not with Iran. But they are militarily weak states, and they walk very carefully.
Yes, they certainly do. All right, and just a final question. Is there a real danger of an escalation in the north of Israel with Hezbollah?
The danger is there. It's clearly both sides are not interested in full-scale war. We have what we call a war of attrition along the Lebanese-Israeli border, limited in scope, but quite costly and devastating. Once the issue in Gaza is settled, then the attention could be drawn to the north. It is possible to come to a settlement that would enable 80,000 Israelis who are now refugees away from the area of the Lebanese border to return. And this is absolutely solvable once the Gaza issue is done with.
All right. So first things first. All right, Mr. Ambassador, thanks very much for taking the time. Thanks for joining us this morning.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.